I get really angry when I see that stuff now because I'm like, you are setting up, somebody is suffering really badly reading that material you're writing there.
Right.
So much has changed in 30 years in our awareness. There's also so much pressure. All of you've got to get 8 hour, all of that cultural pressure can make a person who's struggling think more that they're going to die. I'm going to get Alzheimer's. So we tried everything. I mean, here I am in a new relationship. Now I'm newly married. I'm on my honeymoon. I've got a separate bedroom in my honeymoon because I can't sleep with him because I'm too afraid. I was just terrified. I was just terrified of so many things, including my sleep. And the sleep was the worst because then I felt like I didn't have the emotional wherewithal to manage the other fears that I was experiencing. And when I would have episodes, I would literally think, okay, how much of this can I take without dying? What would be safe here? And I remember, because I had to get myself to the point where it's so interesting, where I would go to my bed and know that I could not outsmart this medication. So having an understanding about all of that is very helpful in all parts of my life right now. It's a deep teaching, and insomnia, crappy as it is, really gives us an opportunity and has given me, it's not something I would have asked for. I don't like it. But it gave me an opportunity because it's something so clearly out of my control.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to yet another really special Talking Insomnia episode. Marilyn's with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm happy to be here.
So am I. And I'm very, very excited to share all your insights and wisdom with our community. And for those who wonder how this came about, you actually contacted me with some interest of potentially becoming a coach. And, I'm very excited to talk about that with you. But you have worked a little bit with Coach Ali, and you're also a BedTyme graduate, which I want to mention. But with that said, take us to the very beginning. How did you start having trouble sleeping?
Well, it was, I'm going to say 30 years ago. Before that, I was the gal that fell asleep in the movies, sleep was never an issue for me. And I always had problems, like if I had a new boyfriend, but that was usually just not used to somebody being in the bed or something. It never went on. I never worried about it, right? Like normal people, like if they have a bad sleep night, it's no big deal. It's like, yeah, well, that's why. And it was like that. And then honestly, a string of heartbreak made it so that when I was with another person, I couldn't sleep. And then when I would go home, I couldn't sleep. And as it happened more and more, what I like to say is I developed a bit of scar tissue around having relationships that went sour, and started to have a little bit more alertness of, is this going to mean that I'm not going to sleep when I go home? Like just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit. And then it blew up when I met the man who is now my husband of 30 years. And I just had a lot of fear about that particular relationship. Like I said, the scar tissue was just, I was really afraid of getting burned again. And the sleeplessness just got out of control. And that's when the cycle of being afraid of being awake and being afraid of the insomnia began. And I didn't know what had hit me. I really didn't know what had hit me. I'd never experienced anything like it. And I did the things that it was very gradual, my suffering with it, because what I'm realizing is it's not the sleep problem, it's the level of suffering. Like when I have people who say to me, oh yeah, well, yeah, oh, I should talk to you, I have issues. I'm like, well, are you suffering when you're up in the middle of the night? Like, is it a problem for you? And they're like, well, it's annoying, but I'm like, you're not suffering, it's fine. You're reading your book and you're going back to sleep. You don't need me, you're fine. It's the level of suffering where, and I thought my story was so unique. And I can't believe every single interview I've heard, everything I've read in your books, that we all think we're going to die. This is our undoing, mentally, psychosis, death, the 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 threat seems massive, like annihilation. And that's where it grew for me. And I sought all kinds of help. I tried acupuncture. I tried, all the herbs, all the stuff we do, right? I mean, everybody who listens to these things knows all the stuff we do. And none of it really worked. One thing used to work was I have a spiritual practice and mainly just a meditation practice, nothing religious or anything like that. So I would read a book by, maybe a Buddhist teacher, and I never knew what it was going to be that was going to break through my fear. But it was usually a word, a sentence, a phrase, a thought that would suddenly jolt me into, I'm just a human being. Nothing's wrong. It's fine. And the episode would end. And it happened every time. And I never knew when it was going to happen or where it was going to come from. And what I used to call it is that I would say I have chronic episodic insomnia, because it would go on for a week or 2 weeks. And then one of these interventions from who knows where would happen. And that would be the end of it. But it would always come back. And so that fear mountain, or as my teacher says, the waxy buildup of that fear got more and more. And I do believe, like, the path in my brain, that was the path, sleep, then it had a worn out pathway at this point. It just knew where to go, right? So we tried everything. I mean, here I am in a new relationship. Now I'm newly married. I'm on my honeymoon. I've got a separate bedroom in my honeymoon because I can't sleep with him because I'm too afraid. I was just terrified. I was just terrified of so many things, including my sleep. And the sleep was the worst, because then I felt like I didn't have the emotional wherewithal to manage the other fears that I was experiencing, because the thrashing, like I shared with you, like sometimes I think about, it's thrashing to insight that happened with me, how my insomnia woke me up to the level of fear that I was living with in just my daily life. And then the insomnia jumped on that train. So anyway, then we have pictures of me in my honeymoon, asleep on the volcano, asleep on the benches. I'm asleep everywhere. I'm conking out everywhere in Hawaii, but in my bed. So that was kind of funny, that sort of tells the story when you see me asleep on a volcano with, an orchid growing up out of the volcanic matter. So there was that. And then I got pregnant with twins.
Wow.
And then I had twins. And, it's pregnancy that gives its own sleep issues. But then pregnant with twins and my terror of all that, it was just so much all at once. I got married, I got pregnant, I had twins within, I don't know, a very short period of time, even though it was the happiest time of my life. So that was what I'm like, how am I miserable at the happiest time of my life? And the insomnia was a big part of that misery for me, because I was suffering so profoundly from it. I was never a person who took medications or anything like that. I really related to so much of what Allie talked about. That's why I reached out to her. I'm like, you're my girl. We really shared so much of our thinking and experience. So I was not that person. I had never taken drugs. I'd been to therapy. The therapist didn't know what to do with it. I spoke to my GP. She sent me to a pulmonologist. He didn't know what to do with me. Yeah, pulmonologist for my sleep. I was 35 at the time. And so then I was given some sleep medication, but eventually, and I was terrified to take it. I was breastfeeding 2 babies. And eventually the sleep medication, of course, didn't work for me anymore. I became open to taking it. And then one day, a friend of mine from college in dance school at the University of Utah, which was another connection with Allie, because I went to dance school at the University of Utah. She said to me, there's this guy in Vermont, and he's a meditation teacher. His name is Shinzen Young. He's from California, from Culver City. And he's a Shingon monk, and he'll talk to you like any time of day or night. He'll if you call him, he'll help you. I'm like, really? At that point, I had been in Al-Anon for many years. And so I knew that feeling of people helping people, and sharing their experience with other people.
For people who don't know what Al-Anon is, tell us.
Al-Anon is for friends and family of alcoholics. So I had control, big issue, big issue, control. And usually there's a little scar tissue buildup from having had things not work out. So that was where I met my husband, and there was a lot of recovery that happened for me there. But then this thing happened, and the answer was always being said to me, you got to let go of control. You're not in control. I just couldn't do it. And then I called one night. It was when the medication wasn't working. I don't remember how old my babies were, but I was still breastfeeding. So they were under 6 months, maybe. I think they were infants. And I said, it was at 7 p.m. And I said, "Hi, my name is Marilyn McLaughlin. Holly said you would work with me. I can't."
And by the way, you got a number from your friend Holly. You just randomly called the number and he actually picks up. Wow. Okay.
That won't happen anymore.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. But yeah,
it's quite well known now, right? But at that time, it was just a very small community that knew about Shinzen. And he said, "Okay, let's work." He didn't ask me anything psychological. He didn't ask me. I said was, "I have 2 new babies and I can't sleep and I'm losing my mind." And his first words were, "I can teach you. I can't teach you how to not have pain and difficulty, Marilyn, but I can teach you how to not suffer. So that's what I can do for you." I said, "I'll take it." And he did this particular meditation called noting body parts, noting body locations. I would just lie there and he would say, "I want you to do it like this, and I want you to label like this. And when you say the labels, here's where it's also connected. I want you to say it in an easy, matter-of-fact tone, just a friendly, matter-of-fact, nothing big going on. Even if that place is just doing that, you'll just say hand, base." No matter what the valence or the type of the sensation is, you're just going to greet it with that friendly tone. So it's be the beginning of that detachment, that equanimity towards the difficulty. We can't remove the difficulty, but how we meet it. That was where I first got introduced to that. So that went on for many, many years. I'm going to say in and out 7 years. I would call him at 3 a.m. "Hi, Shinzen, I can't sleep." "Okay, let's work." And this went on, and during that time, I was also taking meds. I had this doctor who gave me Klonopin, and I went on a little antidepressant. That really didn't work for me, the antidepressant. It had too many side effects. I didn't like it, but I loved Klonopin. Klonopin was a great drug for me. And honestly, I'm not a drug user. I don't care about drugs. I'm not a dangerous person to get. So I was using Klonopin as needed. For then, I was taking the Klonopin. I think I was just taking 1 milligram a night. And I remember when I went to pick it up at the pharmacy, they said, "This is a really strong medication. You might want to start with less." And I was like, "Oh no, give me what's going to knock me out." So here I was working, and Shinzen would say to me, I would say to him, is it not spiritual? Whatever that means now. I look back on that question, but it shows you how culture affects the mind. And is it not spiritual if I take medication? And he said to me, "Marilyn, there's medication and there's meditation. And sometimes a little medication can stabilize you just enough so you can learn the skills that you need to help yourself for when maybe you don't need the medication. So it's all about how you use it." So it took the guilt off of me. And I used Klonopin for 7 years. Like I said, I would call Shinzen in the middle of the night. He'd say, "Let's work." There was one night we worked from 3 a.m. till 6 a.m. And he would say, "Okay, do this, then call me back. Okay, how did that go? Okay, now do this and call me back." And it would go that way till 6 a.m. And then I'd say, "Well, what if you're going to love this one." I remember one morning being in my bed and I'd say, "Well, what if I fall asleep?" And he would be like, "Well, that's the point, isn't it? So it wouldn't be a problem." Like then I felt like pressure to be a good meditator, and to follow his instructions. So that was kind of a fun irony. And he just, the way he modeled the lack of panic over my unpleasant experience, it was remarkable. But I realized later on, Daniel, which is why the coaching interests me, the most remarkable part, at these years later, as I thought about it, was that he answered the phone. Just like you said, you mean he answered the phone? And in the middle of the night, if it was 3 a.m. here, it was 6 there. If it was 1 a.m. there, it was 3 there. And when I'd say, "Can I call you tomorrow night?" He'd say, "What do you think?" And I would wait for him to say, "Don't call me anymore." Never happened. And he said, "If I don't want to answer the phone, I won't answer the phone."
And by the way, I'm a little bit curious about this now. How did you did you pay him? Did you have some kind of no?
It was no. It
How?
was Shinzen was devoted to service.
Wow.
He had a queue. He said one morning, he said, "I got to go. I got a queue." People called him from all over the world.
And
He
how did he
saved
make it? How did he sustain himself?
Well, so eventually I learned that there was this thing in the community called Dana, which is that you do said, but it's not required, but that you do donate. No money is asked for. It's not about the money. It's the teachings are given free. But so, that's how the students support their teacher.
I see. Yeah.
And those were the vows he took. And he lived in a tiny little place in Vermont. And and lived there until now. He has a neuroscience lab at the University of Arizona. So, and the crux of their research has ended up being about the power, you're going to love it, of equanimity.
Yeah. Yeah.
The power of equanimity, not indifference, equanimity, no
Yeah.
push, no pull. And even when my mother died, I called him and I said, "I don't know what to do with all this grief." He says, "Don't push, don't pull." I said, "Okay, thanks, bye." So that sustained me. And all those years, so for that 30-year period, sometimes I used medication, sometimes I didn't. I always have Ambien and Klonopin in my bedside. It'll last there for years. When I would tell a doctor I needed a refill, I'd say, "Because it's old. It's like 5 years old. I don't use it." I had a very relaxed relationship with it. So that went on for a very long time.
And just so we have a little context here, during the honeymoon, you had your twins, etc. That was like a real struggle. Then you found Klonopin, which you used here and there, and you had the support of Shinzen. During these like 7 years, was it kind of like on and off? There was some struggle, but overall you were doing okay, or what was it overall like?
On and off, there was struggle. I would still have episodes. And when I would have episodes, I would literally think, okay, how much of this can I take without dying? What would be safe here? And I remember, because I had to get myself to the point where it's so interesting, where I would go to my bed and know that I could not outsmart this medication, that it was going to knock me out, because then I would go to bed relaxed, right? I would be able to get into that state. What would be safe? Yeah. So the episodes would continue. And then, and I never liked them. Then what happened was I was seeing, at some point I switched to this psychiatrist. I can't remember why. I switched to a different psychiatrist. And I can't remember with the drugs what happened. I remember my mom died. And when my mom died, I didn't have sleep difficulty. And I was like, I get real riled up about the day-to-day, but the things like birth and death, I'm here for that. I know it's not personal. And so something doesn't get churned in my system, I get very calm. And I was like, whoa, if I was able to just go through that, not to say that it wasn't very, very, very painful and difficult, then I want to come off Klonopin. I don't want to be on a drug that I now for sure have a physical dependence on. And that made me very nervous. The idea of, what if I'm somewhere and I don't have this drug, and now what happens to me? I can't control my body. That started to scare me. I also stopped breastfeeding when I started going on drugs. I lost my milk, and it was like, so like with my insomnia, like I lost my breastfeeding. My body really responded to that strain. And anyway, so then the doctor tried to use Ativan, and I could stay awake through Ativan, no problem. Ativan was not my drug. And when I called him and told him the Ativan's not working, oh, the other thing was he said, stay on the Klonopin. Being on the Klonopin is worse than how you would feel coming off it. And I said, it's better than your anxiety. Then the 1 milligram of Klonopin dependence is better than your anxiety. He had no trust in my ability to maybe I've learned, maybe there's been growth, maybe it was just stay on it. It was a little careless in my opinion. And this was a highly respected psychiatrist in LA, I find out. And I said, no, I don't want to be on it. I don't like the dependence element. So that was when we moved to Ativan, but I didn't respond to coming off the Klonopin well. He tried to take me off it too quickly. And then I had a pharmacist who said to me, this is like crack cocaine, you need to take a year. And I took a year and I went very slowly. And every time I went off it, I had a week of insomnia. And whether that was physical or mental, I'm going to assume it was mostly mental because I went off so little at a time. But I remember when we were traveling once to my mother-in-law's house, and she had like one of those lounge chairs, and I had a bed on the floor and I had the lounge chair set up. And I was like, the bed's there if I want it, but otherwise I'm just going to meditate in the chair all night if I have to. And I'll just hang out here because I just can't worry about it anymore. If I'm up, I'm up. And if I go to sleep, I go to sleep. That would last about a week. And then that episode would end. And that was how the coming off of Klonopin was. But then we used Ativan. And he said I was medication resistant because I could stay up through the Ativan. I was like, I don't think I'm medication resistant. I'm just used to the drug called Klonopin, which is a lot stronger. He sent me, there were so many steps in this journey, right? He sent me to a biofeedback specialist. Biofeedback was interesting. I didn't like the therapist, but the information was very interesting because I could see on the screen my tension relaxation response when I was learning how to settle myself even when there was agitation. And the teachings he was teaching me, seeking places in my body where there was no disturbance. Like it'd be like Shinzo would say, is there a place in your body where it's neutral? There's not hyperarousal. There's nothing there, like your earlobe, behind your hand, behind your knee, and rest your attention there where just nothing's happening. And let yourself hang out there. Shinzen's whole thing is just let yourself rest. Do not even try to sleep. Don't even bother. His whole thing is get a good night rest. And he didn't believe in, like you have to get out of bed. Don't get out of bed. He said, just rest in bed. Just hang out in bed. Don't use it. It's a good time to practice. That was his thinking. Anytime's a good time. So anyway, back to the biofeedback. A few things that I remembered was that sensation of being able to work with my body responses and seeing the visual was interesting. And then he would always say to me, Marilyn, you can't make yourself sleep. You can't just knock the light out. It's a gradual, and I remember he showed me this chart, like it's a gradual process and just deep relaxation, just enjoying your bed, feeling the comfort of your bed. Like you can just hang out there. It's the spinning that's exhausting you, right? So this was many years before, last summer when I bumped into your materials. That was another layer of help. So I would do that in bed at night. I would just note body locations. I would do this sensing my bed. And I had medication if I wanted it. I never let myself go more than 2 nights. Like I wouldn't let myself suffer. At that time, the whole idea of self-compassion, that wasn't even talked about so much. And, Kristen Neff's work wasn't on the scene as much, but it was this idea of there's no reason for me to make myself suffer like that. And so I would take medication. Okay, so that's sort of how that path went for a long time. It was very manageable, even through menopause. All my women friends, they were really struggling. I'm like, I'm good. Like, I know this sensation, and yeah, it's a pain in the ass, and who likes it? No one likes it, but just throw your covers off, get a fan, stick your head in the freezer. It didn't undo me in that regard. And it wasn't like I was symptomless, but I've been there, done that. I had so much practice with the equanimity around the incredible unpleasantness of it all. And it is unpleasant. There's no way around that. And then, so that went on for a long, long time until this summer. This summer, I had a speed bump like I'd never had. And I didn't even have that word speed bump. I said, oh my God, I'm in an episode again. And when there's long periods of an easy relationship with sleep and sleeplessness, we tend to lose our skills. We forget the things that are supportive. I forgot the things, and I hear people in your, the people say it all the time, like, "Oh my God, I went back to the beginning. I didn't know what to do. I thought I was so unique. There's nothing unique about me," and that fascinates me. That fascinates me when I listen to your interviews, and I'm like, wow, this is just like a human trauma response. It's really fascinating to me. So we had made plans. Both of my daughters are getting married. One of them's marrying an Irishman. We made a plan to go to Ireland. I hadn't been traveling really, COVID, and all that. And it was a big trip with my children and their, future husbands. And I don't know, made me panic. I was going to have to meet a lot of families. I recently had some real unfortunate family trauma of my own in my family of origin. So the whole thing, the day we made the plane reservations, I had a sleep night that was difficult, and then another sleep night that was difficult, and then I took Ambien and I stayed up through the Ambien, and when the Ambien didn't work for me that night, that undid me. Because like I said, with my Klonopin, I would set myself up with enough so that I knew there'd be no struggle there. But with Ambien, I would take a half an Ambien, and it wasn't that I was resistant to it, because I hadn't been, I never took anything 2 nights in a row. Never, ever, never took anything that was what the pharmacist said. Never take anything 2 nights in a row so that you won't become dependent on it. You'll always know it's there the third night. And that was an interesting strategy for me. I could tolerate the second night because I know the third night I would take something if I needed. So there was the building of that sense of equanimity, little by little. And so I don't really know. Oh, there was, and while I was coming off the Klonopin, I ran into a book called Say Goodnight to Insomnia by Greg Jacobs, right? The CBT-I thing.
I know it. Yep.
And I used it, and it helped me. It really did help me. I would keep my journal, and I tried that this time around. I don't know, it wasn't happening. I don't know. So that was a big tool too, the CBT-I. I'm kind of tracking my way to the thoroughfare to you. And I don't remember if maybe a CBT-I app came up in my feed or something. I don't really know. But I did the CBT-I app that had a coach, and I paid for the coaching option. It was frustrating for me a little bit because I'm a New Yorker. Like I like things fast and now, and it would sometimes take 48 hours for the coach to respond, which drove me a little nuts. But the app was good. I don't even remember the name of it, but it helped me until it didn't. It really did help me until it didn't. And I learned a lot about my body. I learned about what you call the brake and the gas. Like I learned, my body does like light in the morning. It does respond to that. Like I can be so groggy. And it was the summer, so I could go outside and sit on my deck really groggy. And I just felt my body wake up. It was really, I'm really into body stuff. So, that's my profession. So that really fascinated me, the playing with light. And I was getting up at the same time. I don't like setting alarm. I was getting up much earlier than I've learned that my body likes to get up. But I did everything that was suggested, and it helped. And then somewhere along that line, I started to have performance anxiety. I don't know where it happened. And I was like, oh no. oh no, I'm that one person it doesn't work for. I'm that one. I'm that difficult one. Oh no. And surely your videos must have come up somewhere, right? Because now there were, you know, the interwebs knew I was having an episode, right? And your thing came up. And as I started reading it, I was like, oh my God, this is Shenzhen V2. This makes sense to me because now I've learned, you know, I needed 30 years to learn that it's the fight that really, really kills us. You know, the inability, the resistance to take life on life's terms. It's a muscle to be developed, and that this is not just about sleep. That's the thing that I believe, that my struggles with sleep have informed everything, because it's a struggle with anything undesirable, and yet it's there. And what do? We don't like it, and it's there, and it's terribly painful. And what do? It's lonely, it's scary, and that's again when I thought the thing that helped me most was he answered the phone. And that being there for someone else, because there's a learning. It's not in our culture to learn this kind of detachment, that it's okay to be uncomfortable, that self-compassion, and how do we hold our experience when it's hard? And you have addressed all that. And so your work just really lit me up. We went to I eventually, you know, I don't remember how my sleep was here, but by the time I got on that plane to go to Ireland, and the minute, and I was like, okay, you know, 11 hours on a plane, that's going to be cute. I rarely am able to sleep on a plane. And I just decided that I didn't care. I just was like, I'm going to Ireland. You know, it's kind of a good not sleep, right? Where you're not like, whatever, I'm going to Ireland, you know? And the minute the person in front of me, it was a tiny plane, their seat backed up. Literally, they were like on my chest. And my first thought is always, oh my God, what if I was pregnant? I couldn't get out of my seat because there was so much. That's my first thought when there's no room is, oh my God, what if I was pregnant? I couldn't get out of here. And when that person did that, I was like, oh, this is going to be really cute. And I just laughed it off. And I definitely did not sleep on the way to Ireland. And when we got to Ireland, we stayed awake. And when you know, of course, I had my meds with me in Ireland. I had whatever I needed. I wasn't going to make myself suffer. But by then, I just said, it is what it is. I'm here in Ireland. I'm going to have a good time. This is a once in a lifetime thing that me and my kids and their future husbands, there's no kids we're tagging along. We're traveling freely together. And I had a great time. And I did not have sleep difficulty the whole trip. And when I got back on the plane, I got a different seat in a bulkhead row. So no one was backing to me, but I still wasn't comfortable. I didn't care. The jet lag, I was like, oh, the jet lag is going to really set me off. Oh, that's going to be what undoes me. And I was like, whatever. I don't know. It was fine. And then when you and I spoke, or when I partly spoke with Ali, and I don't remember when it happened, but I had a little set off when I started thinking about coaching. I was like, oh, I can't do that. I'm not perfect. I'm sure I'll have, the imposter syndrome came up for me. And she assured me that that's very, very common, and that I don't have to be a perfect sleeper to help other people. More just have the wisdom to walk the path, to answer the phone, and to offer really experience, strength, and hope, and to give guidance to those who might not yet have considered that sometimes, many times the difficulty in this life cannot be alleviated. And so now what?
Yeah, exactly.
So now what? If I can't control it, I can't fix it. Now what do I do? And that's not talked about so much, oddly, in the general public. It's a very new concept, letting go of the outcome, not having an attachment to outcome. We're in a capitalist society where it's productive. And so that's a very it's a very different point of view. And so that's what happened. I spoke to Allie. She said, "No, I think you'd be a great coach. You should absolutely do it, and don't worry about the not sleeping." And then we spoke about a few other things, like my husband. We had a bed situation, and anyway, I said to her, "Is my wanting to change this bed situation trying to control my sleep, or is it really a problem with the fact that he jumps in his sleep?" And she said, "Well, ask yourself, if you weren't afraid of your sleep, would you still want to split your beds?" Well, I haven't changed my bed yet, let's put it that way, and he still jumps in the night and stores. Sometimes I kick him out, sometimes I leave. I just wanna make sure. Okay, yeah, we're good on time. Sometimes I do kick him out. I'm like, "You gotta stop," because if I'm awake, I have trouble falling asleep if he's jumping around in his sleep. I mean, that's just I don't like it. It's fair game to not wanna be able to sleep through an earthquake. And I notice if I'm restless, I'll say, "Well, we'll just lie here," and if my body gets agitated in a way that it doesn't feel good, then once in a while I'll get up and come into this room that I've set up for myself, a peaceful room. So getting out of bed's an option, not getting out of bed's an option. If I ever want to split the bed because the jumping's too much and it keeps me awake, then I'll split it. But it gave me a gentler attitude towards it. And that's where it is today. And I thought, there was some emotional upset the last few days, and then I knew I had my talk with you today, and I was like, "Oh, well." And I was just like, "Whatever." So, yeah, that's where we are today, and the coaching really does interest me. So I just when I was struggling early on, there was nothing like that. She sent me to a pulmonologist,
Yeah.
and people didn't know the things about sleep that they know today.
Right.
So much has changed in 30 years in our awareness. There's also so much pressure. All of you've got to get 8 hour, all of that cultural pressure can make a person who's struggling think more that they're going to die. I'm going to get
Yeah.
Alzheimer's. So having a voice that's like, "No, don't." That I get really angry when I see that stuff now, because I'm like, you are setting up somebody is suffering really badly reading that material you're writing there. Somebody is really
Yeah.
suffering.
There's a lot of that going on. Yeah, that's so nice to hear your story, Marilyn. Thanks so much for sharing it. As you can tell, and everybody who's tuning in can tell, I didn't hardly ever interject. You told it in a very nice and fluid and wonderful way. Now, one thing that I wanted to ask you about was this: like, if we go back 30 years ago, this is like pre-internet. So nowadays, as soon as we have some type of problem, we go to online and search for the solution or whatnot, right? How did you even come across suggestions for supplements, or how did you even research, or where did you begin back then?
I think friends, probably the health food store, try this, try that.
Exactly.
I do remember being online at one point. This was when my kids were older, though. So now I think we're in the 2000s where there's more going on. But in the 90s, no, it was therapists, health practitioners, friends, health food stores. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I often think of it as on one hand, you don't have what we have now, which is the bombardment of fear mongering around sleep and things of that nature. And although you have the possibility of find people who struggling with sleep in kind of online communities like on Facebook, Reddit, etc., it's also tricky because in those communities you often just hear horror stories and people telling you try this, try that, etc., etc. I don't know. My view is that I think overall I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful. I think the fact that we are so connected ultimately is going to lead to things getting easier for us. But it is a little bit of a double-edged sword, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And it's really having to sift through, it's like with anything, it's with body, sleep, health. There's, when I won't say names here, but there was a certain book that came out that really took the world by storm about, health and strength training and how hard you have to train so that you can do such and such when you're in your 90s. And then you have people who are like, and at the time I think I had an injured knee, and I was like, well, that's all well and good, but let's talk about the people who can't do that. So now you're telling me like I'm going to be, that's not helpful.
No.
Eventually this person, and this person was very public and had a lot of great information. But I was so sitting there injured, so upset. The fear that you can put into people who don't fit into a particular category of, quote, wellness or ability to tend to it.
Yeah. We have, I think, maybe it's cultural, or maybe it's even, genetic. We have this like negativity bias, right? Anything that is scary to us, we really pay attention to, because if we miss that, we think that, I could really be harmed or die if I miss this thing. So I got to focus on that. But somebody who's telling you, no, there's nothing to worry about. You can, there's no threat here. We don't pay so much attention to that. It doesn't get as much attention. That message is much harder to get across. But on the other hand, I think the messaging we have around sleep and our insomnia is true, and truth is very durable. So with time, hopefully it will become more part of our culture. But I wanted to ask you, since you first, so our teaching and our messaging, was that you first came across it in YouTube, and how did you approach that? Was it like, did you start watching a lot of the interviews or the episodes in general, or?
I binged on it basically. I just started listening to all the podcasts. I'd go on my long walks and I'd listen to the podcasts. And I think I did that more than the YouTube. And then I realized, well, sometimes the repeats. And so I listened to as much as I could. And then I got Kindle Unlimited so I could get all your books. And I would, that was another question I remember asking Allie, like, is it like, I love reading books on insomnia in the middle of the night when I can't sleep. Like, they relax me because I feel normal. And it's again that thing of, I didn't know where that phrase, that thought was going to come in that would make me feel like it's okay. I'm okay. She'd be like, it really doesn't matter. If you like reading them in the middle of the night, read them in the middle. Like, who cares? Because I enjoy it. And so I think I just ingested as much as I could. And it made so much, I just couldn't believe the connection to the original help that I got.
Yeah.
It was just so profound.
You know what? This just came to me in this moment, that it was almost like everything you knew and had studied throughout the years was now presented to you, but contextualized for insomnia, right? Now it was all like, it was presented to you in the context of the struggle, and now it kind of clicked.
Yes, because I knew it was a truth about more than insomnia. Yeah. It was just a fundamental truth.
Yeah. All right. Now I want to ask you, you tuned into so many of these episodes, so you probably know what I'm going to ask you, but one is, if you could go back to like 30 years ago when you first had this first encounter with what we call insomnia, what would you tell yourself?
I think I would try to help myself understand that I was really more afraid of being afraid. I was afraid of being the unpleasantness, that I didn't have anything wrong with me. Insomnia is not a disease. Having sleep issues is not a disease, but my fear of it is what's giving me a really rough time. And then if my younger self said, but I can't stop being afraid, I am afraid, I'd say, well, then let's find a way to coddle that. Like, for me, it would be like, if you had a child that came to you and said, I can't sleep, I'm so scared, you'd probably bring them in bed with you and give them a massage, you'd probably stroke their head. You would do something that felt sweet and tender to them, and continue to experiment with what felt nice.
Yeah.
So I think that I would be like, well, what can we think of something that would feel nice? So yeah, I think that, and to say that you can't make yourself sleep anyway, so stop trying, and eventually your body it will come back to its homeostasis.
Yeah.
I would try to help break the fear cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure would be so helpful for yourself, but for other people who hear this now, it's a great benefit. And also, finally, you've already touched upon this when you mentioned, for example, that your friends who went through menopause and they were like really upset about their sleep, and you were sort of like, well, it's I've been through this. It's not pleasant, but you already had that kind of acceptance mindset. So you already touched upon this, but are there things you learned from the sleep struggle that has helped in other aspects of life?
Every aspect of life. There's a lot of unpleasantness around. I mean, I am going to die. I turned 65 in July. I'm very aware of the road narrowing. I mean, I know from an 80-year-old perspective, I seem quite, I'm young, but I'm very aware that I'm in a different phase of my life. And there's, I have, friends who have been dying, and people get sick, and fires. I live in Los Angeles. Whole neighborhoods have been destroyed. I mean, there's tragic, awful things, awful, unpleasant things that are happening in this world, and I can't control all of them. And so I've had to learn how to really take care of the fact that hurts a lot.
Yeah.
And to really have great, and that's something else that I think is in your literature, but really, and I've heard your coaches talk about it, really focusing on the medicine of the beautiful things in the now. Really, Shinzen talks a lot about reducing suffering, but he also talks a lot about increasing fulfillment. And I think the real leaning into the joyful, the beautiful, the delicious, the loving is medicine. That is the medicine. So that's something that this work has also taught me, because when I do that, even when I feel like junk the next day, it really, it feels like a wise thing to do. It feels like a true thing to do, and I'm not wasting time.
Yeah.
Focusing. It's not my brain, when I'm having, a time of it, my brain does think about sleep all the time. I can't stop it. It thinks about it all the time. It wonders if I'm going to sleep that night. And this was something else I spoke to Ali about. Like, I can't stop it doing that. And she was very helpful. She said, you had a trauma. It lasted a long time. You thought you were going to die. And I think, like if I knew somebody who had a trauma in which they thought they were going to die, and then something in the present moment kind of gave them that feeling again, I'd say, hey, that's natural. Your mind will wrap around it until it sees you're not going to die right now. You're going to die, but probably not right now. So having an understanding about all of that is very helpful in all parts of my life right now.
Yeah.
I think it's deep teaching. It's a deep teaching. And insomnia, crappy as it is, really gives us an opportunity, and has given me. It's not something I would have asked for. I don't like it. But it gave me an opportunity because it's something so clearly out of my control.
Yeah, that's right. There's a point there about how theoretically, like all the truths that you bring up, anyone could learn about them at any time. But if we're not nudged to do so, we may never do it. And when we encounter something so difficult as insomnia, it's almost like there is no option. We are almost forced to go into that direction. And it's wonderful when we hear a story like yours, where it had led so much clarity and so much fulfillment and so many wonderful things. So I want to just thank you so much, Marilyn, for being a guest here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. If you told me 30 years ago that we'd be having this conversation, I'd be like, oh yeah, if I live, So
Yet here you are. Well, we'll conclude there. So nice to speak to you, and we'll be in touch, of course.
Okay, thanks so much.
Bye, everyone. Hi there, Coach Dial here, and I hope you thoroughly enjoyed the video that you just saw. If you are finding yourself thinking a lot about what your life would be like if you weren't struggling with sleep, if you had bandwidth for everything else in life that you want to do, if you felt like yourself again, if you didn't even give the night a second thought, well, then I have news for you. Leaving the struggle is actually so much easier than we often think. Everything that you need truly is out here on our channel in our free content. The one thing that can be tricky though is that sometimes you don't really see where you are not contextualizing the teachings to yourself. And what also can be tricky is that it can feel a bit lonely and isolating to leave the struggle on your own. If this applies to you, then head over to thesleepcoachschool.com, because we have programs where you can join a community of people that are leaving the struggle, which is led by coaches who have already done so. And so if this, again, sounds like something you'd be interested in, head over to our website, thesleepcoachschool.com, and check out our Insomnia Immunity program. And if you decide to join, we can't wait to see you on the other side.